The 165-year reign of oil is coming to an end, but will we ever be able to live without it? Like whale blubber, oil is a dominant source of energy, will gradually be phased out over the next decades, and here's what that transition may look like. The transition. Between the 17th and 20th centuries, humans killed millions of whales for oil. They stripped their blubber, spinning the iconic creatures in the water and pulling off the fat in a huge spiral like a peel of an apple. The blubber was boiled into oil, then strained into barrels to be used in everything from oil lamps to industrial lubricants. This was the bloody process that brought light to society. It is horrible, Charles Nordhoff wrote in his experience on a whaling vessel in 1895, yet old whalemen delight in it. The fetid smoke is incense to their nostrils. The filthy oil seems to them a glorious representative of prospective dollars and delights. For over 100 years, the voracious hunger for whale blubber drove blue, humpback, and North Atlantic right whales to the brink of extinction. Now, commercial whaling is all but banned. Whale blubber is used in just a handful of products, and whale populations have rebounded somewhat. A similar sea change is coming for petroleum, though when and how it will play out is still incredibly hazy. The best super forecasters, combined with machine learning, are only accurate at predicting geopolitical events up to a year in advance. Luke Kemp, research affiliate with the Center for the Study of Existential Risk and the University of Cambridge Total Life Science. At best, we have general pictures we can paint. But the general trends are clear. We've already transitioned much of our home energy use away from oil. As a climate change pushes us to accelerate the transition, we're developing new technologies that will help the world outgrow its oil dependence even faster, experts say. In a few industries like shipping and plastic, the decayed bones of long dead animals will be a primary energy source for a long time to come. But a post-oil world is coming. The whaling industry is a very good analogy. David MacDonald, professor of petroleum geology, University of Aberdeen in the UK, said, at its peak, the whaling industry was huge, but over the decades it was an inexorable decline. The origins of oil. Humans have been using oil for millennia. In fact, around 40,000 years ago, people in what is now Syria used bitumen, a byproduct of crude oil, to stick handles onto their tools. Fast forward 35,000 years, the Mesopotamians used the same sticky substance to waterproof their boats. The Babylonians used it to build the Hanging Gardens, and the Egyptians used it to embalm mummies. In China, people buried crude oil lamps and gas for heat. They burned crude oil and gas for heat and light as early as 500 BC. By the 4th century AD, they were drilling for these natural resources and transporting it via bamboo pipes. But it wasn't until 1859, when Edward Colonel Drake struck it big in Pennsylvania, that oil was sought at scale, with the same, albeit modernized drilling technique used in China more than 1,500 years earlier. Drake hit a reservoir 69.5 feet down, and the U.S. oil industry was born. Crude oil, which is composed of simple strings of carbon and hydrogen, forms from the remains of animals and plants that sank to the bottom of swamps, lakes, and oceans. Over millions of years, layers of sand and rock covered them. An intense heat and pressure turned these remains into oil and natural gas. They were then locked away in reservoirs, some close to the surface, others thousands of feet below, with gas sitting atop a lake of oil. For the past 165 years, crude oil has transformed virtually every aspect of society. If oil vanished tomorrow, global trade would break down as the shipping and aviation industries ground to a halt. Food security would be precarious, with no petroleum to fuel large-scale agriculture or packaging to keep food fresh. Medical care would be set back generations without the sterile equipment needed in hospitals. Renewable energy projects would be frozen without the components required to make solar panels or wind turbines. Planes, trains, boats, and automobiles. Our transition away from oil will be far greater than that, of course. We've largely stopped using oil for electricity. In October last year, a report by the International Energy Authority found demand for oil will peak this decade. The rise of electric vehicles, EVs, will usher in the next big drop in oil use. Currently, road vehicles make up almost 50% of global crude oil use, according to a 2018 report by the International Energy Agency, IEA. But this percentage will plummet in the coming decades. It's estimated that EV sales will account for over 2/3 of the global market in 2030. If we are particularly aggressive in slashing fossil fuel emissions by 3/4 by 2050, the EV industry could be responsible for more than half of the reduction in total oil demand, according to the BP Energy Outlook 2023, which forecasts future fuel use. In 50 years, most of this car-driven oil usage could be eliminated. Aviation also largely relies on oil for fuel. Planes last decades and cost tens of millions to hundreds of millions of dollars to build. But technology is moving fast in the sector, and new aircraft are far more fuel efficient than aircraft were 40 years ago, and the industry is engaged in reaching net zero emissions by the year 2050. Sustainable aviation fuels, SAFs, will be key to ditching oil. These biofuels are derived from the raw materials used for industrial processes, including waste, biomass, cooking oil, and animal fat waste. SAFs have the added benefit of being compatible with current aircraft engines, and they can be blended up to 50% with traditional jet fuel. Boeing plans to make all of its commercial aircraft capable of flying on SAFs by 2030, and by 2050, if we aggressively cut carbon emissions, SAFs will account for between 30% and 45% of aviation fuels, BP estimates. Shipping is a more stubborn problem. Ships run on oil. Like planes, they are widely expensive to build, last decades, and will be hard to phase out. Around 90% of world trade is carried out by the international shipping industry, with over 105,000 merchant ships currently sailing the oceans and accounting for around 5% of oil consumption today. Without ships transporting goods all over Earth, half the world would starve and the other half would freeze, according to the International Chamber of Shipping. The problem for this industry is you can't just change the fuel. Frederick Bauer, Associate Senior Lecturer at Lund University in Sweden, researchers low carbon innovation in energy and industrial systems. He's not convinced the shipping industry will be able to transition away from oil anytime soon. The International Maritime Organization published its first climate strategy in 2018 and has generally been incredibly conservative in shifting away from fossil fuels, Bauer said. Hydrogen is a potential alternative fuel. Ships could be retrofitted with hydrogen fuel cells, but that strategy comes with problems. For example, to remain liquid, the fuel must be stored at extremely low temperatures. Its energy density is low, increasing the amount of storage required to each ship. Hydrogen is also extremely explosive. Hydrogen-powered ships are still in their very early stages. The first ferries and small ships using this technology are being tested, but large, hydrogen-fueled oceanic cargo ships are still in the design phase. Jay Apt, a professor at Carnegie Mellon University's Temper School of Business and the Department of Engineering and Public Policy, told Live Science that shipping will likely be a vicarious oil user for decades. If I was to look into the cloudy crystal ball, I would say that long-haul shipping would be one of the large-scale users of petroleum that we would see 100 years from now, Apt said. Plastic fantastic. Single-use plastics are littering Earth in ever-increasing quantities. They take hundreds of years to degrade and then become microplastics, which are choking the ocean, littering the tops of mountains, and congregating inside our bodies. The use of plastic is in many ways the more dangerous part of the oil industry, rather than the burning of hydrocarbons, McDonald said. If humanity disappeared from Earth tonight, in 1,000 years the levels of CO2 in the atmosphere will be back to normal, whatever normal is, but there would be plastic in the oceans and soils for millions of years. Synthetic plastic is made from oil and is extremely cheap to produce. Around 12% of the oil extracted today goes towards the petrochemical industry, which makes plastics and fertilizers, along with clothing, medical equipment, detergents, and tires, and this number is set to grow. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development estimates that under current policies, the global use of plastics could triple by 2060. Plastic is extremely useful because its density can be varied. We can try to move away from plastics in products like food packaging, but phasing out medical plastic is more challenging. Plastic is everywhere in hospitals, including in disposable syringes, IV bags, catheters, gloves, and bed liners. It's not just that plastic is cheap, durable, and malleable, it's also sterile, so helps curb the spread of infections. Right now, primary plastics are ridiculously and unsustainably cheap, so oil-free alternatives cannot compete on cost, Bauer said. Bioplastics made from crops could provide a way forward, McDonald said, but the story of biofuel serves as a cautionary tale. Soybean fields have taken over huge swaths of U.S. farmland, in particular because of its use as a biofuel. We have a finite amount of agricultural land, McDonald said, and if we turn a lot of it over to growing fuels, what do we do about feeding people? It's not an easy equation. Everything is related and interlinked. So it's the beginning of the end of oil. But at some point, clean energy technologies will become so cheap it won't pay off to drill and extract oil. The first method to be phased out will be wildcat drilling, in which an area with unproven reserves is explored. Still, oil wells will continue to pump in the vast sand fields of Saudi Arabia for decades. In the US, production will continue at high levels through 2050. This is by Hannah Osborne on Live Science. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support. My Patreon account, the daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.